Good, good. Quite a number of people here logging in. Great.
Penny, would you like to start with without a projection? I mean, to see you and to see Radha presenting you?
Maybe she's comfortable already with it up,
Okay.
and then she doesn't have to.
Very much so. I don't want to change anything.
Yeah,
Great.
that's no problem.
Don't fix it.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Okay, Penny, so we're going to go ahead and begin the introductions, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you.
So we'd like to welcome you all to Life is Yoga. It's a series of discussions and talks and interviews that is focused on the cultivation of a higher, wider, and deeper consciousness and its reflection through all our outer activities and interactions, as well as in our relationship with the world and the universe at large. All Life is Yoga is hosted by the LaGrasse Center here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. My name is Rade, and I am joined by my colleague, Vladimir Yatsenko. So today we are extremely honored and thrilled to have with us Penny Farrow, who will share some of her vast wisdom of Vedic astrology with us during this webinar called Meet the Fascinating Wives of the Moon. So a very intriguing title that she's chosen. And I have personally known Penny for, I think, well over a decade, and was actually a student of hers for many years in Vedic astrology. And she and Vladimir are currently working together on a project. So she is a really close and dear, dear friend to both of us. And we so much appreciate her willingness to come on to All Life is Yoga. She is an excellent teacher. She has, in my mind, truly perfected the art and science of teaching. And so let me just give you a little bit of background on Penny. She is a graduate of Cornell University and has had extensive career as an instructor, researcher, and businesswoman. And she has actually been involved in the Vedic tradition since 1971 and has studied Vedic astrology, I believe, for nearly 30 years now. Penny resides in Florida, where she teaches Vedic astrology and Sanskrit full-time, and she has also got a new online option for teaching these two sciences. Penny has recently launched a newsletter or journal called Cosmic Kaleidoscope Journal, and I'll be putting that URL in the chat box as she speaks. And I'll also be indicating her email and her website should you want to check out either of those, but she has lots of good information on her website. Also, she will be taking questions towards the end of her talk, so feel free to put any questions you may have of Penny in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen, and just leave the chat open for other comments or exchange. So it is my delight at this point, Penny, to turn it over to you, and looking forward to meeting the fascinating Wives of the Moon.
Ah, yes. So it's a pleasure to give this talk and meet all of you. And as this is a very traditional subject, we would like to begin in a very traditional way with the great, beautiful remover of obstacles, Ganapati. And so I'm going to just chant this particular mantra and then the very wonderful student teacher mantra right after that. So I'm going to just do it 3 times. Om Ganapataye Namaha. Om Ganapataye Namaha. Om Ganapataye Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Punaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurupyo Namaha. Hari Om. It's kind of ironic to be doing a talk like this in a high-tech way, because really what I'd like to have us all do is project ourselves back, picture ourselves gazing up at this beautiful vault of stars, this glittering heavens on a very clear night in some ancient land. Maybe you're on a watchtower in Babylonia. Maybe you're on the plains of Gujarat. Maybe on the shores of the Indian Ocean. No ambient light from the city. No distractions from entertainment devices. It's just you and this enchantment. And I think we've all experienced this enchantment out in a country some night in a national park or something along those lines. And we see these points of light in all directions. Some of them are blazing and immediate. Some of them are stationary, and some points of light are actually moving. They seem remote and obscure in a way, and yet there's a compelling attraction to them. And night after night, if we look at them, silent witnesses almost, we begin to notice patterns. And our ancient progenitors recorded these patterns, passed these patterns down, and it became a rich legacy over the years. That patient observation, our consciousness and their consciousness mingle with the outer light and the inner light of a cultivated mind that somehow realizes that that wholeness, that huge pattern somehow exists in us, that the laws of nature that are activated at a moment in time have a continuity through all the orders of reality. And this became the basis of understanding that aligning to nature's patterns with the sky, the heavens, as the macrocosm is a reflection of the microcosm. And this is this basis of as in the whole, so in the part. So our progenitors looked up. We'll never know who. It was a collective, instinctive looking up. And their survival depended on it. If they didn't know the great cycle of sunrise and sunset, they wouldn't know when to get back to the cave so that they could pass their gene pool on to the next generation. So understanding the cycle of light and darkness is where it all began. And once again, there is something in all of us where we're phototropic. Living things are phototropic. We bend towards the light. We seek the light. And this has been ritualized in all cultures. So whether it's India, whether it's Stonehenge, whether it's ancient Egypt, the tendency to ritualize the miracle of the appearance of the light every morning is built into us. It's part of our DNA. It's a reverence for something that we have deep within us. It's the light that materializes and materializes everything we need for this particular, for our existence here in the world. And so it became the want of many cultures, Vedic culture in particular, so beautifully acknowledges that the sun is that light of lights for us, but even the sun and the moon and the lightning, they aren't the real light. They shine after that all-pervading light. And so all of these beautiful subjects that we are studying are all reflections of the central, you could say Bindu, center of the Vedic tradition, the light of consciousness, the light of that wholeness. And so they're all, Jyotish especially, is a limb of the Veda itself, what's known as the Vedanga, the limb of the Veda. And it's especially important because it helps us order our existence on earth. So from the day and night, ordering of the day and night, without devices, nighttime was showtime. So it wasn't only the cycle of the sun, day and night, that was observed. It was the cycle of the moon, all the phases of the moon. The moon is the greatest shapeshifter of all the planets. It disappears, and then it comes back as this beautiful thin little crescent. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then sometimes, at certain times, it turns blood red and disappears, eclipse time. It's a complete showtime. And this cycle of the moon and the cycle of the sun allowed an integration and calendar development. And once there was this dance between the sun and moon systematized, then things like agrarian cultures could take place. Instead of being wanderers, we were able to plant and develop towns and cities. So all of this allowed the fulfillment and the stability of life. So when we want to simulate the same process of understanding these cosmic patterns, we use time-honored methods. So time-honored methods have a formal name. You might have come across this name, pramana. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali speaks of pramana as the right means of gaining knowledge. And the first of those means is direct observation. So even we in our modern times, fixed as we are to the computers, are missing the experience of actually, going to that place where you could see the horizon and watching day after day, month after month. What are the grahas doing? What is their backdrop? What set are they playing their lines out against? So it's important for us to continue to have that curiosity and that direct relationship with the beautiful vault of heaven. One of the things we need to understand is how we on Earth look out at the whole cosmos. And so we can think of, I live in Florida, so often I think of this as a beach ball, a big beach ball, a cosmic sphere. And we're as if suspended in the middle of that beach ball, our earthly sphere. And from our earthly point of view, we're looking out in all directions at the skin of the beach ball, we could say. And that's the starry field. We can see all the star groups. And we especially notice the star groups that are around not just the celestial equator, but the path of the sun, something called the ecliptic. So I'll show that to you here. So here we are on Earth. Here's the sun, and we're looking at the red line is the path of the sun. And we observe the sun as it moves through all of these star groups. And these are particularly the group of stars that hug the path of the sun. Those would be the zodiacal rashis or constellations that make up our 12 signs of the zodiac. And we know that the sun goes through one of those signs every month. The ancients, however, were not just interested in how the sun moved through those 12 rashis. In fact, in India, they developed an astrology that was more based on the path of the moon. And what they noticed was, it's hard to kind of make any sense out of something like this, but if we put in some arrows, we will see this red line is what we call the ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun as we see it moving around. And along that, there are discrete star groups. If you watch month after month after month, you would notice that the moon, every day of the month, passes through. It moves at a particular distance each day, and that distance is not exactly, there's some variance, the distance between these discrete star groups. And what wound up being mapped out is that there were 27 of these star groups. The moon would pass through in a month, all 27. And of course, I'm only showing you a section of this, but it's a complete circle. There would be a circle, and all 27 of these star groups would be along that circle. And they all wound up getting names and characteristics, and the beautiful mythology, so to speak, or stories arose describing them as 27 lunar mansions. And at each lunar mansion, welcoming the moon would be one of his 27 wives. Hence our topic of Meet the 27 Wives of the Moon. So these lunar mansions are known in the tradition. They're called Nakshatras. So a nakshatra, there are various ways of breaking down this word. And Vladimir and I have had talks about this, which is the right derivation. So for now, we're just going to, rather than go through the actual Sanskrit of the word, we're just going to describe them as single stars or groups of stars that mark the passage of the moon each day. So if we take a 27-day cycle for the moon, which is one of the cycles that are used, we would say that the moon passes through each of these nakshatras. And every nakshatra has a name, and it's a feminine name, because the story does go that Daksha and his wife had a lot of children. And among those children, there were 27 daughters that Daksha married to the moon. So this is the legend. This particular beautiful temple, I'll show you two pictures of it, is on a vastu that has 27 angles in and out. It's called a star vastu. It's very, very beautiful. And it is Sri Somnath, one of the temples dedicated to the Jyotirlinga. And it's this particular temple that we would see this very unusual vastu representing the 27 daughters, the 27 nakshatras. So he married the moon to his daughters, and he told the moon that he must treat each of them equally, no favoritism. Unfortunately, one of those daughters, her name was Rohini. So beautiful, so bright, kind of a reddish hue. For those of you that may know astronomy, Rohini would correspond to Aldebaran, a brilliant star in the constellation of Taurus, one of the brightest constellations and biggest constellations in the zodiac. And it was noticed by the other sisters that the moon favored Rohini. One of those other sisters was particularly irked by this because she was every bit as beautiful and bright and lustrous as her sister. They were almost as if twins, right across the zodiac from each other. And as Rohini was in the constellation of Taurus, her twin, Jeshta, her name is, known as the star of Antares, is in the constellation of Scorpio, sitting right at the heart of the Scorpion. Well, there's a kind of idea of someone who sits at the heart of the Scorpion. And like a Scorpion, she went to her father and complained about her sister and complained about the husband. And the moon was cursed by the father. You didn't follow what we told you to do, and you must wane and die. The other sisters were not very happy with Jeshta. What did you do to our husband? And so they went back to their father and said, no, we don't. Actually, it was Brahma. The father went to Brahma, who cursed. So they went back and said, no, you have to undo this. You have to undo this. And it was said, like the lilac fairy in Sleeping Beauty, I can't undo the curse, but I can modify it. So the curse was modified so that the moon did indeed have to wane and die every month, but he would also then grow again. And so that is how the whole waxing and waning of the moon was codified. Even the moon's fondness for Rohini. This is very fascinating because sometimes people who are very scientific think these myths are kind of just myths. But in fact, a lot of these myths, so to speak, encode astronomical truths. So as this story of the waxing and waning encodes the astronomical truth of the cycles, the phases of the moon, this fondness for Rohini, it happens that there's a astronomical phenomena of occlusion, where the moon covers a star, and disproportionately, the moon winds up covering that star far more than any of the other stars. And it's a kind of this story is kind of a way of showing the favoritism for Rohini is because the occulting of that star happens disproportionately. It's an astronomical fact encoded in a myth. Where are the nakshatras mentioned in the tradition itself? Well, they're actually mentioned in Veda. Even if the nakshatra itself isn't specifically mentioned, and they are, the deities for the nakshatras. So many of the hymns in the Vedas, in the Puranas, talk about the deities of the nakshatras. Our beloved Radhe has an amazing book on this exact subject. I recommend it highly. One of the places in the Veda that they're especially in their fullness mentioned is a remarkable suktam called the Nakshatra System, where every one of the nakshatra deities are called to the sacred fire and worshipped. They're also mentioned in astronomical texts. Astronomers today are astonished at how accurate these seers are in determining planetary diameters, distances in the cosmos when there were no instruments. The accuracy, they shake their heads. They just cannot figure out how that could possibly have happened. But it's recorded in these texts, the most famous of which is something called the Surya Siddhanta. They're also mentioned in what we call Jyotish Shastra, the texts that record not only the astronomical phenomena, but also what does it all mean? What do these patterns mean? It was Emerson who said that astronomy, or that astrology actually, is astronomy brought down to earth to describe the affairs of man. And so that is what Vedic astrology is about, understanding the cosmic patterns and how they relate to us. It's not so much that they're causal. People have ideas that, oh, Saturn is doing this to me. No, it's as if that they're innocent cosmic markings or markers, and their relationship to each other is almost a language describing the laws of nature operative at that moment. And those laws of nature, for something that arises in that moment, if it's a birth, if it's an event, will be patterned by that. And if you understand what that pattern means, then you can interpret how, from that moment on, a life might go, an event might unfold, a building might collapse. I'm sensitive to that. That just happened in Florida. Maybe the date that that building was built wasn't at a good time. So, when we want to learn about how the nakshatras might pattern us, we need to understand how the ancients viewed them and the kind of information. Because it's 27 different sisters, they all have their own personality. Their star groups look a particular way. The deity, maybe we could call the deity the law of nature that described the mansion they were in and patterned it in a particular way. The actual name of that wife of the moon, it has meaning. The Sanskrit root, the derivation of that root, what does it mean? All of that informs us as to how a particular marker in a chart, like someone's moon or a sun or the rising constellation at the time they were born, all of these important markers in the chart, they'll be in a particular solar constellation, but they'll all be in a particular nakshatra. And back in the days, in those days of the ancient rishis, it wasn't the solar constellation that they used to impart meanings. It was the wives of the moon. Which wife was activated by the sun? Which wife was activated by Saturn? And what were they doing in the chart? That would be described. It's as if the nakshatras are the DNA of the horoscope. So I picked two wives to talk about tonight to give you a little feeling for how this might work. So the anatomy of a nakshatra is that in the 360 degrees that makes up the big circle of the zodiac, if you divide that by 27, you get about 13 degrees 20 is the length of each of these nakshatras. So you multiply that and you get the whole circle. So each nakshatra has that length of 13 degrees 20. So we're going to start off not at the beginning, but we're going to start off with one of my favorite wives. The lore around this wife is very rich and very beautiful. And the name of this particular nakshatra is Hasta. So Hasta Nakshatra is known as the star of dexterity or the star of skill. This nakshatra happens in the constellation of Virgo. We're not so much talking about, again, the solar constellation, but just so you have an idea of where it is. And all of the nakshatras have what we call marking stars. They have a particular name. They're called Yoga Tara. Tara means star. And when the planets, especially the moon, moved through these 27 discrete star groupings, there was a particular star that, or a group of stars, that was bright. And if a planet or the moon were close to that bright star, it had the ability to impart, to transfer that DNA to that particular planet and whatever function it serves in a particular chart. So the marking stars for Hasta, there's 2 marking stars, and we don't need to go into all the details of it. But that's how we identify where all the planets are, what nakshatras they're activating or being activated by. The nakshatras themselves are embedded in star groups. They're part of larger star groups. And those groups can often form a pattern. And for the nakshatra of Hasta, the pattern is a hand. And we call the pattern pratima. It's a visual symbol, we could say. We could say it's the nakshatra symbol, the pratima. And Hasta, actually, the root has means a hand. And the symbol is also a hand. And so from there, we already can start to infer meanings. So just as the visual information of seeing the star pattern looking like some kind of hand, and then the name that's given, the root, Hasta, also invokes this idea of a hand, we start to use the second pramana of inference, anumana, to start to infer meanings. So someone who's born with this particular nakshatra prominent, well, maybe they're skillful. Maybe they have the ability to take someone by the hand and guide them. All kinds of ideas about these inferences can be spun out. And then the word has not only means hand, but it also is a root that means to laugh. So these particular natives have this kind of childlike ability to laugh, almost cherub-like. And I use this picture of the baby because even the physiology of people with Hasta Nakshatra, they have this kind of chubby, cherub-like cheeks. They have a little kind of rolled chin, and they shine. They have this humor and light and innocence about them. And we'll be talking about a couple of natives with this nakshatra prominent, and you'll see what I mean. So from the verbal root hust, to laugh, from the word hasta, which means hand, all of these meanings, we can start to put together a composite picture of the kind of person would have hasta prominent in their chart. Each nakshatra, as I mentioned, has a deity. And for Hasta Nakshatra, what a beautiful deity. The deity is the sun itself. And also other deities that derive from the sun, such as Savitri, the daughter. Savitri is the name for the sun, and Savitri, the daughter of the sun. When we follow the hymns in the Veda, the stories in the Purana, and even a beautiful story from the Mahabharata about Savitri, a story I'll tell you in just a bit, we also get more inferences of the kind of meanings that will be found in natives where Hasta Nakshatra is prominent. So there can't be anything more shining and brilliant than the sun itself. And so these natives have this ability to glow and shine in life. Savitri's story is very compelling and imparts other beautiful meanings that we definitely want to be aware of. She was the beautiful daughter of a king and his wife who had a very hard time conceiving a child. And they did all kinds of practices, and no daughter came. But Savitri granted their wish, and they had this beautiful, beautiful daughter, princess. And the king wanted to marry her, and she was very selective about who she wanted to marry. At some point, she went to a hermitage, and at that hermitage, she saw an old blind king and his son, a beautiful, handsome, radiant prince named Satyavan. And they fell in love and decided they would marry. And she went back and told her father, I finally found someone. And the father was thrilled, but his astrologer informed him, oh, no, I know Satyavan, and he will die within 1 year. You can't have your daughter marry him. But Savitri was absolutely set on marrying. And they did. They married. They lived at the hermitage very peacefully for that year. And then as that end of the year approached, she did many practices to make herself strong, to perhaps overcome this fate of her beloved husband. And on the day, he didn't know this, she did. He went into the woods to chop some wood, and she insisted on coming. And he said, no, you've been fasting for these 3 days. You're tired, you should rest. No, I must come with you. And so she went into the woods, and he started chopping the firewood, and suddenly fell down, motionless, and she ran to him. And she, with all of these practices that she did, was able to see Lord Yama. Let me show you this picture. Here we go. She saw the Lord Yama coming for her husband, and his little rope, taking the soul and carrying him off. And she begged him, no, don't take him. And he said, I must. I'm the Lord of Dharma, and this is how the fate is for him. And he strode off, and she followed him. And he said, you can't follow me. What's done is done. And she was determined she was going to follow him through bushes and tears in her garments. And finally, he turned around and looked at her, and he said, I will grant you a wish, any wish except the life of your husband. And so she granted a wish that her father be able to have more children, because she was the only one. Granted. And then he went off again, and she followed still, on and on and on. He turned back. He said, you can't do this. You can't follow me. because your husband is not coming back and I'm going to lands beyond the earth. She said, I will follow you. And he said, okay, I will grant you another wish. And she granted that her husband's father regain his kingdom and his eyesight. And he granted that. And then again, he went off and again she followed, so determined. And he once again wheeled around and said, a final wish I will give you because of your dedication and your love. And she said, I wish to have a child and that the child's name, father will be Satchivan. She didn't ask for his life back because she was told, you can't ask that question. But she devised a clever way of wording it. So that would have to be the result. And Lord Yama looked at her and basically met his match. And he said, Princess, you are so clever. You are so determined. It will have to be. I promised you. I grant that wish. And her husband revived, and they went back to the hermitage, and that was that. So from that story, we get this notion, very true notion, that people with Hasta Nakshatra are wordsmiths. They're word wizards. They're very clever. They're very intelligent. And they have, in a way, magical voices, because it was kind of magic that she was able to prevail over the Lord of Death, Lord Yama. And Vladimir tells me that of all the stories in the Mahabharata, this is one of the only ones with a happy ending, through the cleverness of Savitri. So,
Penny, can I just ask maybe a clarification for folks? When you say people who have Hasta, what exactly does that mean?
it means that some important graha, planet in their chart, like the sun or the moon, or their actually rising degree, is right near that star. So as the planets move through the circle of the zodiac, they pass through those same 27 mansions. The nakshatras mark 27 zones of the zodiac. And so the light of those stars shine on the grahas. And if you're born with the light of this particular nakshatra shining on some important factor, planet, then you will become imbued with some of these qualities.
Thank you.
So let's look at a wonderful example. For some reason, I'm clicking and this is not getting up this particular. Here we go. So yes, so putting it all together, putting these ideas of Hasta all together, the hand suggests skillful activities, the cleverness, a person who might be very skilled in communication and very good with words, inspiring with words, clever with words. It also can be someone who's very sunny, with a good sense of humor, a lot of light around them. And this physiology that I mentioned, these cherub looking. It could go the other way in someone who is actually very peaked looking, depending on whether the graha that was involved is something that's very supportive in the chart or the opposite. But we would like to look at an inspiring native, and so we will. We're going to look at, in fact, a truly magical voice, Swami Vivekananda. So in Swami Vivekananda's chart, this nakshatra is very powerful, very prevalent. And he had the power of the word. If you don't know a lot about Swami Vivekananda, he was a disciple of Ramakrishna, Paramahansa Ramakrishna, and was cultivated by his guru to go out to the West and to bring Vedanta to the West. And he attended the first World Congress on Religions as the representative of India, one of the representatives of India. All the major religions of the world were represented. Here is a picture of him. And when he arrived in the United States, he hadn't really applied to be a speaker or anything. He thought he could just go and speak, but he wasn't invited to speak. And it wasn't until a professor at Harvard who had him speak at Harvard and realized the mind and the intellect and the vision of Swamiji, and found out that he wasn't going to speak, gave a letter of reference. And so he would be among the delegates who would speak. And so there were about 2,000 delegates. It was very dramatic. You know, the bells tolled for the number of religions that were being represented, and the delegates walked into this great hall together. It was really quite something. It was in Chicago. And he looked at the other speakers as they went up to speak, and they all had all their books and, you know, notes, and he had nothing. And when it came to his turn to speak, he went up just simply, everybody was curious about him, and looked out at the audience. And he said later he went inward and connected with Saraswati, who is the goddess of the voice, for her blessing. He said 5 words. These are the 5 words he said: brothers and sisters of America. What happened after that was legendary. All the delegates broke out in cheers and applause. They cheered and clapped for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I don't know if they exactly stood on their chairs, but the equivalent of such. It was unbelievable.
There was something else which maybe it's in time to mention.
Yeah.
He actually said differently. He said sisters and brothers of America.
You're right. Sisters
And it changed totally the whole America's attitude towards women. That was a totally new world in one sentence.
You're right. I have no idea how that got inverted, but there it is. Sisters and brothers of America. Thank you. You're absolutely right. And yes, he was like the rock star of that particular conference. And so this beautiful nakshatra that gives in the right chart a magical voice. Certainly Swamiji had that power of speech. Also his looks. If you look at him, you could see the sort of rolled chin and these beautiful cheeks and this kind of, we don't have, you know, color pictures of him, but a very radiant being. Now that's a very exalted personality. What would it look like in a regular person? Well, I don't exactly have a regular person. I have a famous person. So we're still not in regular people. And yet, even though this is no Swami, I promise you that, it's still someone that exhibits magical voice, same kind of looks, shiny appearance, and incredible sense of humor. So this is actually a singer. You might not know this singer, you might know this singer. His name is Adam Lambert. And you could see just by how he looks, again, the cheeks, the chin. His mother used to say about him, he's like sunshine. When he walks into the room, it lights up the room. And he has a legendary voice, such a beautiful voice that the band Queen, who was looking for a singer after their legendary singer had passed on years before, they had looked high and low to try to find someone that could sing with them. heard his voice, and he's now their lead singer. So you could see, he's quite a showman, laughs all the time on stage, great sense of humor. And he's got those cheeks and chin and nose, and he's a veritable youthful cherub kind of guy. Very delightful. And in terms of skillfulness, his range is legendary. He very recently put out a song for a new musical written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, who you might know from Phantom of the Opera, Cats, Jesus Christ Superstar. And he featured Adam on this album. He also, this particular nakshatra also can give good fortune and good luck. I mean, it took an incredible amount of luck to be able to outwit Lord Yama. And so they are known for sudden rises and good fortune in their lives. Let's do, we have some time to take a look at another wife. So this is the star group known as Asrini. So here again is the ecliptic, and we have these twin stars. You see? They're not quite as bright as each other, but they definitely have this idea of twin stars, so twinning. And by the way, here's another little star group. You can't see that very well, but you could see this one very well. And look how bright this one is. Well, that's that wife called Rohini. You could see how she outshines everything. So the moon was like beeline to Rohini. However, there is Asrini. That's our topic in the moment. And these twin stars named Asrini, if you look at the surrounding stars, so this is a little diagram of the surrounding stars, kind of looks like a horse's head, doesn't it? And what a surprise, Ashwin means a horse. So I don't know whether this wife had stables in the back that they went horseback riding on, but this idea of a horse, very prominent in this nakshatra, large animals. But the Ashwinis, or the Ashwin Kumaras, they had a lot of horses in their life because they are the twin sons of Surya and his wife Sanya. And they drive the chariot of the sun every morning. And they perform wondrous deeds. And their conception is a story in and of itself, which gives a lot of the meanings to this particular nakshatra. So it's a long story, so we'll just do the short part. Sanya, married to the sun, had problems living with him after a while because he's so bright. He was just hot and burning. And so she needed a break. And so she took off, but left her shadow as a surrogate wife without the sun knowing. Lots of backstory for that. Eventually he found out, I won't tell you exactly how now, and he found out from Sanya's father that she had turned herself into a mare and had taken off. So he turned himself into a stallion and went out after her. And when he found her, it's said that they were very joyous to see each other. Here they are. And their breath intermingled. And in the intermingling of their breath were conceived these babies, twins, the twin sons. And they're called the Ashwin Kumaras. So this word Ashwini, possessed of horses, And these twins, there are two of them. One is named Dasra, which means accomplishing wonderful deeds, giving marvelous aid. All of these wind up attributes of this nakshatra. And the other, Nasatya, kind and helpful and friendly, but they're mainly known as the Ashwin Kumaras. There's lots of stories about them as well. But you can imagine if they have to have the sun's chariot going around every day, the whole zodiac, they move very quickly. So this idea of quickness and also brightness as well, and also this idea of breath. So Ashwini natives have a lot of inspiration, a lot of prana. And so my native that I wanted to share in these last minutes with you is the tennis star Serena Williams. I think a lot of her opponents will say, she's really fast. She moves like the wind and is unbelievably strong and inspired. So she has a very important placement in her chart, right on those twin stars. It's her rising degree. It's right on those twin stars. So her whole being is imbued with these meanings of not only quickness, but inspiration. And also, if you are driving the chariot of the sun, you make an entrance every day. So these natives, they know how to make an entrance. There's something very compelling about them. So let's look at Serena Williams. You think full of energy, full of life force, full of prana. She's jumping up and down, having just won probably a long match. She still has energy to spare. Movement, speed, and also a compelling look. That certain something that draws people to them. And then we can't forget that the Ashwin Kumaras were twins. So is Serena a twin? Well, she's not a twin in the sense of a twin that was born at the same time. But if you think of these as metaphors, which they are, Serena has an older sister named Venus. And they were twins in every possible way. They trained together. They lived together. They wound up competing against each other in finals of so many tennis matches. And so this twinning idea was definitely in her life. And it's also a lovely thought that these ideas don't have to be absolutely literal. They're metaphoric. And so much of the application of attributes has to be on that level of metaphor. Not literally true, but you could find the essence of it and it will apply to that person. There are 27 of these. It makes quite a lot of stories and beautiful studies. And everybody in their charts have important placements in one or another of these wives of the moon. And they tell so much about the destiny pattern and the attributes of the individuals with these star patterns. Not as well known as when you think about, oh, well, he's a Taurus, or he's a this, or he's a that. They're subtler, but in many ways more powerful. So we've had our two examples, two very different wives, totally. And all of them are like that. They have such unique characteristics. And this way of understanding the sky patterns and bringing in meanings into the chart and into the various natives is a very rich lore and a very fruitful study. So I know that many of you may be being introduced to the idea of Vedic astrology for the first time. And I wanted to particularly pick a topic that was unique. So we don't see this study in any other form of astrology. And yet it's so compelling and so accurate. And I'm very happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you so much, Penny. And maybe if you want to stop screen sharing, then we can get your beautiful face on the full screen.
Okay, that would be fun.
And I think, can we do it from our side, Vladimir, too?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay. And then you'll see, there we go. Let me just do a different view here. And then you'll see down there in the Q&A, if you want to click on it, Penny, there's 2 or 3 questions, and you can
Well,
pick
I see
one
a
or
very
two.
sophisticated question. The first one would be a very sophisticated question. The question is, there's no planet in the actual chart in Hasta Nakshatra, but there is one in divisional chart in Hasta Nakshatra. Generally, we don't use the nakshatras in the divisional charts. They are unique to the main chart. Would be good if Penny could repeat the boon that Savitri asked from Yama. I got a bit confused. The last one, do you mean? So she asked that she would have a child whose father would be Satchivan. So there's no way she could have a child whose father is Satchivan if Satchivan could not be brought back to life. That was what was so clever about it. She didn't ask what which she was forbidden to ask. You cannot ask for him to come back to life. But she found a way to ask for a boon that required that he be brought back to life. So that shows this sort of wordsmith, this cleverness that she had. Let's see. Which nakshatra do you find to be most significant, the ascendant nakshatra or the lunar nakshatra? So this is a very good question. So because we are at a time that's much more material, Kali Yuga, it's a much more material time than in Sat Yuga, long ago. It seems that the ascendant nakshatra is more accurate than the moon's nakshatra. We have more choice, we are more willful. And so the actual lagna, which represents the doership, seems to be the one that's more prevalent now. And also the owner of the ascendant. So for example, if you're a Virgo rising, then Mercury is, so to speak, the ascendant lord. We call it the lagna lord. And so whatever star, whatever one of these 27 nakshatras Mercury is in, will describe the native quite well. What else is here? Seems every nakshatra has her best quality. Rohini, the most beautiful. Hasta, the word wizard. What is known for Ashlesha, Shadabisha, Uttarashadha, and others? Well, I picked out certain characteristics. They have many, many, many meanings. Some of them are less, let's say, flattering than others. So Ashlesha is the serpent. The deity is the serpent. And on the very good side, it can represent the Kundalini Shakti. Also, very entrancing speakers. For Ashlesha, they like snakes, they can entrance you. So we could have that side of it. And then also, because snakes have poison, they could be great healers. People who do Ayurveda, people who are pharmacologists can have Ashlesha. But then it has its difficult side as well. What else? Are certain nakshatras associated with astrology? Yes. There definitely are certain nakshatras associated with astrology. My teacher always talked about Shanabisha, represented the vault of the heavens, and this idea of the patterns in nature through the deity of Varuna. So that's one in particular, but Hasta as well. Maybe some of you attended Claudia's talk on Hasta Samudrika, Hasta the hand, palmistry. So they're sisters, Jyotisha and palmistry. You're supposed to do them both. And so Hasta is also a nakshatra for Jyotishis. What else? Is it possible to determine Ayurvedic constitution using nakshatras? The nakshatras are classified. I'm not sure in what text. I got a list from my teacher, and I'm still trying to ask people who are very familiar with the Ayurvedic Shastras, whether it's actually in particular Shastra, but I definitely have lists of nakshatras that are correlated with the Ayurvedic doshas.
And we do have just two more that's ended up in the chat box, Penny. One, here we go. Would there be a next lecture and continuation of this lecture? My dear, is there Act 2 coming?
So Act 2 for this particular topic, I don't know, we'd have to talk about it, because to really talk about this topic with a lot more fullness would require being able to navigate a chart.
Sure.
That's the way you would really see it. And to navigate a chart requires a lot of training in all those pieces. But, who knows what the future will lie, right? Depends on.
And I suspect you have some podcasts probably on your website they can go to and just learn a little bit more about Jyotish, or not. I'm not sure if they
I have some podcasts. I have a number of publications. I write for the Mountain Astrologer, which is mainly a Western astrological magazine, but I have a column called The Eastern Window, and it goes way back 2016. And so I start in a very basic way. And so I have all kinds of topics. I have an article called Meet the Fascinating Wives of the Moon, but it's all kinds of topics. And then this journal, the journal that Radhe was mentioning, it's written by my students. I mentor them to prepare them to be able to write and speak and do all of those things that hopefully will get this teaching out more widely. And so the second journal is dedicated to the nakshatras. We cover 9 nakshatras, the ones that have the brightest marking stars, because the brighter the marking star, the more radiance from the marking star, the more imprinted any planet, graha we call them, would be if it were in that light of that star. So we went for the brightest of the marking stars. And that journal is accessible. There's a link in the website that takes you right to the journal.
And I've put it out on chat too, both your website and the link to the journal. Good. I have a question, Penny. If you have just a couple minutes, I know we're running close to your time, but it dawned on me as you were speaking there. There's such a devotion and dedication and passion to Jyotish, to Vedic astrology that you have. And I don't think that I've ever asked you how it is that you came to this magnificent science and art. Would you feel comfortable sharing that?
Sure. It's a little dramatic story. I'll try to make it a little less dramatic. But I came to it because I had a very difficult situation with my only kid. When she turned about 16 years old, there was something that was like someone else walked in. There was just this change, and it was very disturbing, and it kind of went downhill quick, and I was scared, would be the word. And so someone said to me, you should have her chart done. and you should have it done in this Vedic system. And I said, I was reaching out wherever I could. And so I did. I had the chart done by a very gifted astrologer. I felt very fortunate. And from the very first, as soon as I sort of saw the chart and he started speaking, it's as if something woke up in me. And then what he told me wasn't easy to hear, but it explained so much. And I felt like I got taken from a dark room into the light, and that I understood, and that I understood what I needed to do and how I needed to place myself. And things were not what they seemed. You know, there was much more to this child than I knew. I knew one side of her, but something had shifted in her karmic pattern to a completely different mode, and that would shift again, you know, X number of years down the line. And it gave me great comfort that there was a roadmap and that I could navigate it. And I found myself making a vow. This is really actually what happened, which was, if I could help one mother the way this helped me, I would have lived a worthwhile life. That just came to me in that moment. That's how powerful the experience was. And so I never looked back. You know, I was doing something completely different, and I ran two things side by side for a while. And I just whatever I could to try to find this, and luckily found a couple of very good teachers, but the one I settled with was unbelievable. And that was it. My life just completely changed.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm sure that that major shift in your life was reflected in your own chart,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
in the timing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Pretty amazing. It's like I've always said, who wouldn't want to know this science, right? It's just so beautiful and explanatory, and you can look back and understand things, and then you can look forward and you can prepare for them, or you have time to kind of gain a different perspective and a deeper perspective with things. So
In fact, I'd like to, with just what beautiful thing that you said, end with something that my teacher had said somewhat recently. People always ask about destiny, free will, and fate. And he said recently that, you know, destiny implies a destination, some kind of road that you're on. Destiny, it needs to be tended. Fate is destiny untended. So if you don't tend to your destiny, then you may not arrive at that destination or arrive at it in a way that's smooth. So I love this idea that destiny, that fate is destiny untended. And one way to tend your destiny is to understand the patterns. And with that understanding, you can use the free will to tweak, to make choices that are better choices because you're in the light instead of in the dark.
beautifully said. Well, thank you so very much, Penny, and we thank all our attendees for coming. And we do hope that we can continue this collaboration, whether it's a Nakshatra 2 or just a different topic within Jyotish. But we really so much appreciate you sharing your wisdom and knowledge, Penny. Thank you
Thank you,
so
Penny.
much.
Would you like to close with mantra, maybe?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Namaste.